Hey, y'all, this is Everett, the Jeep driving preacher, wanting to kind of just start off with something new on the series here. I'm going to talk about church security a little bit. There's quite a few security issues that churches face, and the issues can't really be ignored because we have this idea of a church as being a place where people should be able to feel comfortable and protected, but unfortunately, churches seem to be soft targets for problems and not really even just talking about gun violence. What I'm saying here is that sin pervades humanity, including those who are within the church. And because of this, bad things happen within the confines of the physical church building, and within the church, if you consider the church as being just the people. Um, because the church isn't just a country club for holy people, but rather it's a hospital for sinners. There's bad people who are in the church, and bad people are going to take advantage of those who are vulnerable one way or another. The point to be understood here is that no person, according to Scripture, is a good person. Paul writes in Romans that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We're all sinners. We all do bad things. There is no one who is good. No, not one, is what we find in Scripture. Perhaps we find from our human perspective qualities of a person that we choose to call good, but this doesn't negate this indwelling issue of the flesh within a person. Leaders within the church can also bend to the temptation to compromise their own convictions, which leads them to take advantage of people who are in a vulnerable state, or even just bend to the temptation in their own vulnerable state. There's no person within the church who's exempt from this problem. Richard Baxter wrote, "Take heed to yourselves, because the tempter will more ply you with his temptations than any other man. If you will be the leaders against the prince of darkness, he will spare you no further than God restraineth him. He beareth the greatest malice to those who are engaged to do him the greatest mischief." Basically, Baxter is saying that Satan works hardest against those who do the most to fight against his kingdom. He'll throw temptation to those who are the leaders of the church. He'll throw temptation to those who think of themselves as righteous, who uh, or to those who others might view as righteous. No one is immune to this issue. Other issues that can arise in the church include, but they're not limited to, sexual abuse, financial fraud, adultery, child abuse, elder abuse, violence, accidents, fire, vandalism. The church, regardless of denominational affiliation, should take responsibility for their local body and do something to prevent these types of issues. One issue that can be seen in the Houston Chronicle story about sexual abuse in the Southern Baptist Convention is that the Southern Baptist Convention is not a governing body over Southern Baptist churches. So the SBC as a convention can't issue a decree of a rule to follow to prevent incidents of abuse from occurring. What then needs to happen within these individual churches, these self-governing churches within the SBC, is that they're within their respective local associations and their state conventions, is that we should strive to work together toward the prevention of these types of incidents and also other types of incidents which cause harm within the church, whether it's to the church body itself, whether it's to individuals within the church body, or even within or harm to the physical structure of the church. Um, so, what I'm wanting to do with this project in this series dealing with church security is to help us figure out what kinds of things we can do to help provide a better security program for our churches. This isn't going to be the 10 commandments of church security, but it needs to be a starting point for discussion in developing a church security program. I'm going to have a series of videos of podcasts or however you want to look at it, that's going to serve as these conversation starters for churches to begin to accept responsibility for their local congregations and then everything involved with having people at their facility and interacting with their clergy and their staff. So, one of the things we're going to talk about in coming sessions is a biblical perspective about security. Um, why do we need to have church security? Because the church is supposed to be a safe place, right? So why do we need to provide security in the church of all places? Um, we'll talk about some risk assessment during that time. We're going to talk about policies. Churches ought to have good policy statements for the various activities that occur on church property and also on church sponsored trips. We're going to talk about cameras. The use of cameras can be a benefit to a church in providing video evidence when an incident is reported. We'll kind of get into some stuff about cameras as well. We'll talk about life safety regulations. We'll talk about how we interact with children on our campuses and children on our off-site events. There's a lot of people that interact with children nearly every time the church doors are open, and we have to take great care and how these interactions are handled. A church can't function without volunteers. So we'll deal with some things with volunteers as well. We need to have steps in place to properly vet our volunteers for the various ministries that the church handles. We'll talk a little bit about active intruder response. I've developed an active intruder program specifically geared toward churches, and again, it's not a one size fits all. Do these things and everything's going to be wonderful in the event of an active intruder situation, but it's more again getting us to the point where we can have discussions and start a conversation about what we need to do within our own churches to make it a safe place, to help in the event that the church itself is targeted by people who are intending to kill those who are within the confines of the church. The next topic we'll talk about, we'll talk a little bit about counseling. A lot of churches provide biblical counseling or discipleship to those who are struggling. The church needs to consider options for outside counseling service to help in recovering from a security-related incident as well. All of this kind of put together as well. We're going to talk about a security ministry team within the church. So we'll dig into these different topics as time goes on. Each session is probably going to be about maybe 10 minutes, give or take, as we dig through these important topics. So I hope that this introduction is at least a little bit beneficial for you today. And we'll look forward to digging in deeper with some different topics as we move through this series. Stick with me. My plan is to have something new each week. So stick with me on that, and we look forward to seeing what we can do moving forward and dealing with some church security related issues. We'll talk, like I mentioned a few moments ago, that we'll talk about the active intruder response program that I developed for churches. It's called RISE, and RISE is an acronym. We'll get into that during that time as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can comment on the video, and I'll do what I can to answer questions the best that I can. Thanks.